Hey everybody, it's Mike in Ventura, and I'm here with the world famous, or soon to be world famous, Dr. Spore. That's right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And this is the guy that appeared magically at the beach, and we do like the word magic here today. We're discussing all our experiences, travel. We're discussing a lot of different subjects here about everything from Eastern philosophy to cannabis. we covered a lot of the.
And everything in between.
And we're going to cover a few more topics for the next few minutes. We've got, well, something I wanted to bring up is you mentioned unconditional love. And so many wizards, they don't have quite a spiritual sense, or maybe they're charlatan wizards, as you like to call them.
Yes, there's a lot of charlatans out there. A lot of people who like to think or like to claim either they have themselves convinced or they like to convince other people that they can do things that they really can't, or, they possess some sort of knowledge or power. I think something that goes hand in hand with that unconditional love is that humility.
The humility and being a work in progress,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah, so I know that I don't know. I know that I'm just learning and that I'm on a journey just like everyone else. And all the knowledge I've acquired has gotten passed down to me from my elders and my research. And, so I'm happy to share everything that I've attained along the way, but to know that I have a lot more to learn than I do to teach.
Well, you've told me you spent a lot of time studying, reading books, and you've spent a lot of time with direct experience with people, one on one, and you've done a lot of work traveling too. But when it comes to YouTube, I think you wanted to give a shout out because you got a lot of your wisdom from a lot of
Shout out
YouTube.
to YouTube. Definitely got a lot of wisdom off of YouTube, listening to lectures, Alan Watts, Manly P. Hall, Terrence McKenna. There's been quite a bit of teachers that we now have access to. Thank you to the internet. Thank you to YouTube. Uh, that have made all of this amazing information accessible to the average everyday person. Even if you're not into reading, you can listen and you can still glean so much information.
And somebody you mentioned quite a bit is Carl Jung.
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned from?
Well, I find psychology fascinating. I do like a lot of Jung's concepts. I think he went deeper than most other thinkers go. I think he's up there with the Nietzsche's and the Heideggers.
More like a philosopher,
Right, right.
beyond Sigmund Freud level, right?
Right. It goes into beyond psychology into more existentialism, meta philosophy almost. Talking about things like the collective unconscious, the collective consciousness, the ego, the psyche. I mean, all these terms that have so much depth that I think most people tend to glaze over, kind of like we're doing now.
Right. We're
in a, in
covering
a
a lot of
15,
topics.
15-minute segment, so it's...
Well, don't feel limited by it because we can keep on recording a few of these. I'm sure people will be interested. And when we're talking about unconditional love, that's a lot. That's really hard for a lot of people just to accept.
I think it's one of the great fundamental spiritual teachings from Christianity to Buddhism. I think most of the ancient tribal philosophies.
You were saying Christ taught unconditional love was one of his teachings. I mean,
Well, I mean, maybe not directly verbatim. We could glean aspects of that, but I think looking at that phrase "unconditional love," it's really it's like trying to find that purest form of love that's not jaded or tainted by anything. That's not hinging upon you do this for me and then I'll love you because of this, or it's just the thing about unconditional love is that most existence in the universe is transactional. There's a positive and negative. There has to be a buyer in order for there to be a seller. There has to be a seller in order for there to be a buyer. But the unconditional love is not this way. We can cultivate it within and give it out and share it freely and create infinite amounts of it for nothing in return. That's one of the few things in the universe that exist with that type of power.
Yeah, well, it's a level that we all want to attain. Well, most of us. Also, you talk about gratitude and enoughness. Is enoughness your word? Is that
I don't know where I picked it up. Half the things I pick up, I got all kinds of great quotes, and I try to give credit where it's due. Again, just passing on the information that
there
I've
you are being
gathered.
humble again, once again?
But there's a lot of quotes that I have that I don't know the origin of, and sometimes I Google them and I can't even find the verbatim quote. So maybe it's a little bit of my own fusion and interpretation. Enoughness. That's kind of a new one that I'm playing with lately.
That sounds more like it's something that you've come up with. You've studied Eastern philosophy quite a bit, and isn't that kind of a sort of an Eastern philosophy of
Absolutely, practicing the gratitude, contentment.
enoughness is meaning that you are satisfied, right? Or you've reached a level of satisfaction. Is that a simplistic way to put it?
Well, here's another quote I heard recently that I don't know who said it, but I really liked it. It said, "Gratitude takes everything that you have and magically transmutes it into enough." And so I think being in that state of enoughness is a good thing to practice. There's always more we can do. There's always more we can have. You can't eliminate the desire to do and be and have more, but I think it's also equally important to be happy with what you do have right in front of you.
Everybody talks about their God, and I'm going to go off script a little bit because we don't really have a script today, but like for me, when I say God, I'm talking about the creator. And honestly, it seems to me there's not a whole bunch of creators. There's just one creator that created this. And all these religions are trying to explain that in some way. And maybe put a title to something that you can't really put a title on.
Sure.
Perhaps.
Well, I think when you're talking about love, or you're talking about God, or you're talking about, say, consciousness, for example, these things are infinite. To really understand what they are, you have to understand that they have no limits. And by putting a definition on it and defining it and putting it into a box and being able to symbolize and draw and replicate what that is, well, that's ultimately not that, because that's something finite, right? So that's what the Hindus say. They say neti neti when you're talking about God. It's infinitely not that, not that. So anything you say that it is, well, it's ultimately not that, because if you're putting it into words, you're taking that infinite and making it finite by defining it.
Wow, that is it's some heavy stuff. I guess I'm a beginner, but I'll share with you what I do for gratitude is that sunsets are a big deal to me. So I'll look up at the sunset. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I'll say, thank you, God, for another day. And when I say God, I'm not particularly picking on any religion. I'm thinking of the Almighty Creator that put me on this planet and spinning 600 miles an hour through the outer space.
Well, I think I resonate with what you're saying, and I give thanks as well. And I don't know necessarily whom the thanks is to.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think the one of the core principles of a lot of the Eastern thought is that it's you. You're the creator. You're the master who makes the grass green. If you think about it, things aren't intrinsically green. Green is your brain's interpretation. Green happens back here. We can prove that metaphysically and neurologically. There's science today that's confirming that on every level. So you don't experience the world, you experience your brain's interpretation of the world. And so without your perception, it wouldn't be light, it wouldn't be sound, they would just merely be energy waves floating in the ether.
So that brings us to prayer. I mean, this wasn't in our script, but prayer itself is maybe a directed form of energy then, if you...
Oh, absolutely. You're tapping into a specific vibration, like we talked about with the water, and blessing the water, and putting your intention into the water, and thanking the food that you consume, and things like that. When you're living intentionally, you're putting a specific vibration out into the universe, and the universe responds with the like vibration. Like attracts like, gravity, things come together.
For me, it seems that prayer works the best when you're caring about somebody unconditionally, or you're praying for somebody to get well, or when you pray for yourself, something gets lost in the translation. Am I off base? That's just the gut feeling I have. Say I was praying to win the lottery ticket. It doesn't happen.
I think the key word there again is intention. What is your intention?
Intention.
Yes,
there you go.
Yes, I think intention is more powerful than the thought or the word. The most powerful thing, talking about all of this, is feeling. You have to feel it. And when you feel the emotion, that's when you're really moving energy. That's when you're really commanding the vibrational space around you. It's by putting your emotion into it. So you could sit there and go, I'm so grateful and I am so powerful. And you can do the affirmations and say the words, but unless you're feeling it, unless you're giving it that gusto, that's the word I like, is gusto. Enthusiasm.
A wizard with gusto. A wizard with intention.
Putting that emotion into it, that's what moves mountains.
The shaman writes down his intentions, like on the walls. We were talking about cave paintings.
Sure.
They were putting their intentions that they wanted to have a good harvest or a good successful hunt.
Absolutely.
So they
were practicing
the
the law of attraction without even knowing how it worked. They were just so in tune with it and tapped into that knowledge and that sensation of our thoughts becoming things.
Wow, this is a great talk. To put the power of intention down. And so many people at home, if you just get out and journal, and journaling is a powerful thing for you. You have your magic journal here.
Yes. I got my wizard spell book here. It's got the flower, the tree of life on there. And the tree of life represents the interconnectedness of all things. Kind of like we were talking about earlier.
And you state your intentions in there, and people that are perhaps they're not happy in their life or their job or their whatever, if they start writing down their intention, think of the power that might have on their life.
Absolutely.
We could actually be helping people.
And we could even tie that into what you were just talking about with the prayer, because you're taking your thought frequencies, you're putting them into a specific pattern, and you're staying with that pattern. And so when you stay with that resonance and you stay in that frequency, one drop in the bucket at a time, eventually you'll have a full bucket. And there's there's energies all around us that we can tap into if you have the awareness and the sensitivity to do so. So the prayer and the intention are essentially the same thing. It's just the intention is coming from a place of power, where you're empowered, you're declaring to the universe, this is what I'm doing, rather than asking, oh, please grant me this.
Yeah, for some reason that doesn't seem to work so well in my experience. But, as far as until you have, like when you pray for somebody to get well and they get well, but compare it to when you pray to win the lottery and you don't win the lottery.
Well, and I think, again, the key difference there would probably be the emotion behind it. You really, really want grandma to come back from her surgery, right? You want her to get well.
Right.
You're going to put your gusto and your enthusiasm into that wish, into that frequency, into that thought and that vibration that you're putting out. Do you really expect to win the lottery? Probably not. So you're probably not putting that emotion into it because you're not expecting it. And if you had to choose, would you rather have grandma still around or would you rather win the lottery?
So either we're teaching people how to help grandma get better, or we're teaching people how to win the lottery. Both.
It's like technology. You can apply it for whatever you like. I could use my smartphone for insanely beneficial things and also pretty detrimental things at the same time. It's just a matter of how I choose to apply it.
And there's something to be said for unconditional love and gratitude. Well, and can you expound on Eastern philosophy and some of the things you've learned?
Sure. The Eastern philosophy ties into all of this because when you're bringing it into psychology and Western science and metaphysics and things like that, a lot of the things we're discovering today in the scientific community have been well known and talked about in the yogic and in the Hindu and the Taoist and the Zen and the Buddhist circles and communities for thousands of years. Things like non-locality, non-separateness, non-linear time, things outside of time, space, time. These are all, so they sound like new sci-fi concepts, but again, the a lot of the Eastern cultures had this stuff figured out 2,000-3,000 years ago. It's pretty fascinating to see how many parallels exist between the two.
And you've mentioned Hindu a couple of times, and I'm aware that they believe in reincarnation. In fact, 1/4 of the planet believes in reincarnation. And we're not going to talk about climate change just this show, but where are people going to come back to if we, there isn't a planet here anymore? If we don't treat this planet properly, I'm just saying, where are all these reincarnated people going to come back to?
I think with any of these philosophical, metaphysical discussions, it's easy for things to spiral down the line into the future, or to the ultimate end of things. And a lot of people that I've talked to ask me about death, and so for the end of humanity, the end of the planet, whether it be death or chaos, whatever that may be, it's my understanding, it's my belief, it's my opinion that there is no reality other than that which is perceived. And there are modern sciences that will confirm this as well. Without a perceiver, there's no reality. So you can't have an organism without an environment. You can't have an environment without an organism. Like I said, the existence is transactional. So we have all these thoughts and these fantasies about death, that it's going to be this black void, that we're buried alive, that it's this endless abyss or this endless hell or this endless paradise or whatever. But those things are kind of just ideas, And so kind of like I was talking about with light and green and the way our eyes work, it's our perception that brings things into reality. For example, a rainbow. We can all agree that rainbows exist, but they don't exist until we bring them into reality through our perception.
Mm.
And so I think it's like that with essentially everything.
Well said, well said. Wow, it makes me think, yeah.
It's definitely some tasty food for thought.
Well, then we have shamanism, which is we also like to call wizarding.
That's ancient tribal wizarding. Exactly.
Alchemy.
Yes.
And that's dealing with chemicals, or is that dealing with metals, metallurgy?
Well, alchemy is the precursor to chemistry. Alchemy and wizardry is kind of the Western version of ancient tribalism in some senses, but they were pushing the boundaries and doing innovations in certain sciences that hadn't been done yet. But alchemy is also a spiritual science. When people talk about the transmutation of lead into gold and things like that, a lot of these terms, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, a lot of these mystical terms are actually code, are actually ancient secrets that have been hidden because of things like the Inquisition. They were literally had to go into hiding because of the Catholic Church and other organizations that were trying to prevent them from doing this type of work and this type of spiritual science and having that awareness. You talked about slavery. Big part of that was not having the access to books and information, through all history, all cultures. That's
apparently it was a crime to teach a slave, as horrible as it sounds, to read. You could a white person would go to jail for helping. It's just a terrible chapter of our humanity.
Yeah, and I think throughout all history, that's the recurring theme, is the people with the power trying to keep the masses and trying to keep the people who they're trying to control from obtaining certain knowledge. That's just a common archetypal theme of just if you restrict the knowledge and the information people have, then that allows certain groups of people the ability to more or less control the other groups that don't have access to that knowledge, that information.
Wow. Well, I've never really been a big fan of the word religious. I'm a fan of the word spirituality. It's always been that way for me. Do you agree with that? You've mentioned Eastern religion, but I think when you're talking about that, you're talking about a whole different animal.
Well, yeah, I think Buddhism, often people think of it as a religion, or they think of it as a philosophy, and it's both and it's neither. It's very paradoxical. Taoism is very paradoxical. Zen is very paradoxical. It embodies both sides of everything, you know, and they really point out that duality that permeates everything. That's where the yin and yang, you know, everybody's familiar with that yin and yang symbol. Hardly anybody knows the origin of that. That's it's an ancient Taoist symbol, and the Taoist philosophies kind of spell all of this out, you know, as far as the illusion of separation or the illusion of cause and effect, things like that.
Wow. Well, we're going to have to wrap this one up for right now, but we're going to come right back and we're going to be talking about healing plants and the cannabis movement. We're going to be talking about mushrooms. We're going to be talking about altered states of consciousness. And then one of your favorite topics, astrology. So,
Anytime.
So this is Mike and Ventura. We're going to sign off for right now. Please watch part 2.
Thank you.
Coming up soon.
All
It
right.
might be part 3 by the time we're finished.
Part 12, who knows?
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Just go ahead and click on the next video and you can see our next train of thought.
Keep it